Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today, I'm posting a video regarding a motorcycle ride that Christy and I did. It's a United We Roll ride to the Pentagon Memorial. Started up at Jimmy's in Herndon, Virginia, and went through the Dulles Terminal, and then we rode out to the Pentagon. Hope you guys enjoy the show.
Thank you for bringing in good weather. Awesome day for a bike ride.
Yeah.
Good for you. My name is Rob Grunwald. I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army. Where my Army at? Navy. There you go. Couple. My boss, Rear Admiral. Cool. Marines. Hoorah! Air Force. Coast Guard. All right. Anything else? School crossing guards? We good? Beautiful. Well, thank you for your service, and thank you for supporting the 9/11 Memorial, and thank you for coming back again this year. I was here that day on 9/11. Everybody remembers where they were. Everybody knows where they were. It was our Pearl Harbor. It was our where were you when Kennedy was shot.
Yep.
It was that time in our era. I was here in a meeting supporting the Army, General Maud, Lieutenant General Tim Maud, who was killed in 9/11. He is the most senior officer to die on duty since Vietnam. I'm here because of people like Lori, people I knew. I lost 31 colleagues that day. It was a bad day for us. It was a bad day for our country. There are better days ahead. So 9/11, it was a beautiful day. If you were local to the area, you remember. And And when you go outside during the day and you look up and it's a blue sky and there's not a cloud in it, that's a 9/11 sky. It was a beautiful day. But you have to remember back, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have all the reporting on CNN like we have today, the instantaneous news. So you have to remember that, because as I see people with their cell phones up, we had flippy phones. Anybody got a flippy phone? Yeah. We're coming back. We're coming back. But we had the flip phones, right? And everybody talks about, I could see New York on TV and we could see what was happening, but we couldn't see the Pentagon. Anybody know why we didn't have any pictures of the Pentagon? Because it was 19 years ago and things were different. We didn't have all this security that we have today. We didn't have all the cameras that we have today. We had that one little camera. Remember seeing maybe that picture? That one little camera down at the corner parking lot down there shooting this way that saw something. And I don't know what you see, but I can't tell what it is. We know what it was, but from that picture you can't tell what it is. But the reason is, this was a parking lot. This was a helipad. There was a fire truck parked there. The roads were just like they are today. There was no reason for anybody to be here. Like in New York, there were no reason for tourists to be here. There were no reason for anybody other than the big brass, the VIPs, who parked here to be here. So we had no cameras, we had no cell phones, we had no security, for the most part. We had no CNN, we had no internet. That's why when the plane hit the building at 9:37 in the morning, we had no idea what was going on. Right? I was in a meeting starting at 9 o'clock. No idea what was going on. Okay? So we have a beautiful day. All right, where are my guys from last year? Here's my test. There we go. Where did this plane take off from? Dulles Airport. All right. So why is that important? All right. It's important for me because I consider this a very local memorial. Okay. The planes that took off from Boston and hit the towers, the people that were on the plane were from all over the place, but not necessarily from New York. The ones that went down in Shanksville probably had no association with Pennsylvania. But the plane that went down here from Dulles Airport was mostly full of people from here. The people on the plane were traveling and business people and school people from here. So that's why for me this is a very local memorial. Because everybody who perished, I should say everybody, most people who perished that day are from the DMV. Okay? So it's 9 o'clock, we're in the building, and the plane hits the building. It was bad. It was bad. Now, and did anybody watch any of the specials on Discovery Channel or History Channel? Right? Anybody see Attack of the Pentagon? Did you see me? Huh? A little older, a little more hair. Got my COVID-19 here. Right? Okay. And then there was another one called the Pentagon, who had Marilyn Wills in it, and she was in the meeting that we were in. The Army, it was a bad day. The Navy, it was a bad day. The DIA, it was a bad day. Right? The Pentagon was started to be built in what year? 47. Close? 41. Good call. I bracketed you. Right? 1941, the Pentagon started to be built because they knew we were going to enter the war. And we had to get all those office buildings that DOD was in downtown and put them in one place so that you could put everybody in one place and it would take 7 minutes to walk back and forth if everybody in DOD was in the Pentagon. Some people didn't like that because they thought this became a big bullseye. In retrospect, it did. Okay? So, 1941, the Pentagon began being built. The first shovel of dirt went into the ground, what date? What famous, infamous date in American history did the first? September 11th, 1941. The first shovel of dirt went into the ground to start the building of the Pentagon. Yeah, it's one of those Lincoln Kennedy type weird things. It took 16 months to build this building. 25,000 people were worked on building this building. Remember my guys from last year? Those buildings back there still aren't built. They've been being built for 2 years, and they're still not built. Amazon will be built before that, right around the corner. So September 11, 1941, the building began to be built, and in February of 43, it was done. 26,000 people work here on any given day. 3,000 support staff work here on any given day. If you were to walk every corridor, every branch, every hallway, you would do 17 and a half miles. So if you got any runners out there, the Marines, you see them with chains on their back with backpacks walking around. Silly Marines. The interesting fact, though, and I'm going to get back to why I'm telling you all this, I'll bring it back, I promise. So in 1941, they start building the building. It is the largest low-rise office building in the world. Okay, anybody been to the Reagan building? That's a big building right there. That's close here, but not. Okay, you could lay the Empire State Building down, and it would go from one side to the other of the Pentagon. You could lay down the Capitol building on its side, and it would take up 1/5 of this building. So they built this building in 1941, and they built it out of concrete. They did not use any steel. Why not?
War.
The war. We're building ships. We're going to give the steel to the ships and not put it into the Pentagon. This is critical. So we build it. They say you could put a whole battleship together with the steel we saved. We're not doing this. Many years later, in the late 1990s and 2000s, the brass decides the Pentagon has seen its best days and we need to update it. We need to bring it into the 20th century, not just the 21st century, because things have changed. Security, fire safety, disabled personnel, we need to bring that into this era. So in the late 1990s, they start to remodel the Pentagon, and they do it in sections, in pie sections. And they take everybody in that pie out of the building and put them in Crystal City, in Pentagon City, in Roslyn, in Alexandria, and Springfield. And they say, when we're done, we'll bring you back. It was a smart move, because when they brought these people out, they weren't bringing these people back in until it was done, because moving is no fun. So what they were doing was take all these people out of the building from this section, put them all over the National Capital Region, refurbish this side of the building, and then take the people from the next section and move them over. Refurbish that section and move the next section over. And then when they were done, they were going to bring everybody from that they moved out 10 years ago and put them back. Good idea. Good idea. So in early 2001, this section was done. Steel, reinforced concrete, storm power windows, fire resistant, flame retardant, bomb retardant windows were put in this section of the Pentagon and this section of the Pentagon only. No other part of this building was protected from an attack except that section right there. The terrorists had no idea when they crashed into the building that if they had crashed into any other part of the building, they would have killed thousands and thousands and thousands of people. But they crashed it here. And we only lost 125 because of the reinforcements done here. One is too many. One is too many. But this building saved a bunch of lives based on all of those new construction features. Right? Now, the pride of being American. I see a lot of flags out here. I see a lot of flags on the bike. Heard Lee Greenwood coming in. Awesome. All right. Pride in America, pride of being American. Do you remember it? Yeah. Everybody had a flag. Everybody helped. Everybody said please and thank you. Everybody was courteous. Everybody held the door, right? Kind of exactly like it is today, except completely different. All right? I wish we went back to that. We all had a goal. We were all rowing in one direction. They tore this section of the building down and put it back in less than a year. The firefighters, the police, the first responders get a lot of well-deserved press for what they do every day and what they did here and in New York. But after they were gone, the construction workers, the wire layers, the carpet layers, people putting in the desks, people from all over the country working for one contractor 8 hours and then working for another contractor for 8 hours and working over and over because they were bound to determine that the terrorists were not going to win. And we were going to show resolve and we were going to put this building back to the way it was. On September 11th, 2002, we had a ceremony right there and we were back to where we were. The next day, September 12th, people were back in this building working. It was still burning. It was still smoldering. People were back in that building working. Because if you were on the other side of the building, it didn't affect you. It was a strong building. Why are we here? We're here to remember. We're here to honor the memory of her husband, my friends, of people I didn't even know, people on the plane, people in the building. We're here to remember them and their service and just coming to work every day and just being Americans. So the youngest person who was killed here that day was how old? Three. Dana Falkenberg and her sister Zoe were with mom and dad. They were on a plane. They were going to California, and mom worked at Georgetown University. Mom got a job in Australia. Good for mom. She was taking her family to California and then on to Australia. Dana was 3 years old. This is the first bench you see when you go in. A lot of people leave flowers down there, put money in there. Okay, her sister Zoe's right next door. And then we had the 3 students. I was talking to somebody about the 3 students, right? The 3 students, right? And their teachers and their chaperones. And they were going because why? Do you remember? Everybody remember why they were on the plane with the students? The students won a science fair at their school. And the students were going right up the coast of California, and they were going to a science fair with National Geographic. And their teachers were going with them. And that's why you have 3 11-year-olds, Asia Cotton, Rodney Pickens, and Bernard Brown, who are the next 3 benches. And then there's a big gap. And the designers left a big gap in the memorial because they wanted to signify that there were no teenagers or anybody young on the plane other than the 5 I mentioned. What day did this happen on? What day of the week?
Tuesday.
Where are all your 12, 13, 14-year-olds?
School.
Yeah, pre-COVID. Right? Pre-COVID, they're all in school. Right? So the next person, youngest person to die was 22-year-old Edmund Grafton Young. He worked for me. He was an IT technician. He happened to be in General Maud's office that day, working on his computer because he had an issue, and the plane went right through his office. I used to work with his sister, met his parents, great people, great people. 22 years old, right? He'd be 41 today, who knows what he'd do. And there are stories like that. I was talking to, here's my dad, talking to that young man over there, you know, and everybody remembers where they were, right? He was going downtown for an appointment and had his camcorder, and he recorded, you know, the flames, I mean, the smoke and everything going up, right? Everybody had some place to be, and the stories from over here, both good and bad, are just such coincidence onto why somebody was where they were or not. Those kids were on that plane. They could have been on any plane. The people going out there on business trips could have been on anyone. The plane hardly had anybody on it because it was pre-9/11, and planes were different, taking off with 30%, 40%, 50% of people on it, and that's why the terrorists chose those airplanes. Less people to fight back. So there are stories over there of somebody who was TDY, somebody who was going on a trip, who had never gone on a trip before. Somebody who was in a medical appointment that day. Just happened 2 months ago to schedule a medical appointment that day and wasn't where they would have been if they'd been at the office. The person sitting next to me in the conference room who did not make it, sitting to my right, was in the building 1 hour every other week for the meeting. And because of the holiday, he happened to be there that day because we moved the meeting. The guy sitting next to me to my left is a very famous soldier. His name was Max Belkey. Max Belkey was the last soldier to get on a helicopter to leave Vietnam. Max Belkey was the last soldier to leave Vietnam. He was sitting to my left. About 15 minutes before the plane hit the building, he left the meeting. I was very happy. Max was an older gentleman, way up in his 60s, almost 70, and he could not have negotiated himself out of the room that we were in. Little did I know, until I found out days later that Max Belkey had left my meeting and went to another meeting with Lieutenant General Tim Hall. Max Belkey, very respected. There are so many stories. Somebody who went to get a coffee, somebody who went to the bathroom, just happened to get up from the desk. Somebody who was never in the building that happened to be there that day. A lot of coincidence, a lot of happenstance, a lot of bad news. But as you go on beyond the memorial, you see the benches. For those of you who remember, the benches are in different directions. The benches are in different directions to tell you whether the person was on the plane or whether they were in the building. So the way the designers built the memorial was, if the bench is facing in the direction that I have right here, and you look at the name on the bench for each one of the 184 people that passed away, and you look up there, what do you see? The sky. The bench is in this direction, the people were on the plane. So if you go into the memorial and you see the other benches, they're in this direction. Because if you see the name, what are we looking at?
Pentagon.
The Pentagon. The people were in the building. So there was a lot of really neat stuff that went into designing this memorial. 1,100 applicants threw in their names and their designs, and it was whittled down to 30-some, and then whittled down to a few more until this was selected. And the reason it was selected was because of neat little nuances, like which direction the bench was in. If you look at the memorial, it's hard to see, I know. There's a wall that starts right where these trees are here, and you can see it going around the memorial, and it gets taller and taller and taller. It's called the age wall. It starts 3 inches above Dana Falkenberg's bench because Dana was young. Right? And the wall gets larger and larger and ends 71 inches above the bench. The oldest person who died, a Navy retiree by the name of John Yandick. Right? So you have things that mean a lot and other things that are very aesthetic. You have pea gravel there that you can walk on. That is just a different shape, a different texture. Underneath the benches you have water with aeration so that you can hear different sounds, see different textures. At 9:37 every day, the water gets turned off the pool of water in honor of 184 people that died. So the plane hit this side of the building going over 550 miles an hour with several thousand pounds of jet fuel because it had just taken off from Dulles. It didn't get far. It circled. It lined up this side of the building. And for those of you who can see the building from where you are, you see the first row of windows. Then you see where it juts out. And then you see 3 columns. You see a next set of windows and then more columns. The plane hit 6 windows to the left of the first 3 columns that you see, going over 550 miles an hour, carrying several thousand pounds of jet fuel. And it exploded, and I was watching the special the other day. It said it burned at 1,700 degrees. If the building wasn't reinforced that it was, many more people would have perished. As I crawled my way out of the building, the sprinkler system went on. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. So the plane hits here going that fast and blows up. And I always tell the story that some of the folks in my office, and these are the blast resistant windows, right? Which is great. It helps things going in. It also prevents things from going out. All right? So there were people trying to get out the windows, and these aren't windows. Right? These are windows. Right? And they couldn't get out the windows. And the windows bowed a little bit from the construction. And people were pounding on the windows, kicking the windows. I had a young specialist, Petrovich, worked in my office, and took a HP printer and threw it against that window, and that sucker bounced back at him. And he threw it a bunch of times, and finally enough of the window frame gave that they were able to push the whole window frame out. Right? Every 9/11 when I see him, I tell him he still owes me for that printer. Right? I was the IT guy. He owes me. Talked to Lori about, earlier Ken about, we didn't know who was with us for days. For days. It wasn't until I think Friday or Saturday. Because it wasn't like it is today. You had emergency, people were going to hospitals, nobody knew what hospital they took them to. Alert rosters weren't any good. You got lack of accountability of people. Okay? So it was bad. But I tell you that because we talked about HP a little bit. We talked earlier about country and patriotism. Companies were coming here and dropping off everything we needed to get this building back in shape for the next day, the next week. We couldn't do anything with it. We had printers, copiers, faxes, we had computers, we had laptops, we had network, cable, we had routers, hubs, gateways. What do you do with it? I didn't even have a building. I appreciate you giving me all this stuff, but I got no use for it. Now. I will, but I don't now. And that's why I like to talk a little bit. I go off script a little bit and I talk about FEMA. And I talk about Hurricane Rita, remember that? Hurricane Katrina, right? We just had that mess that happened in New Orleans and up the coast. We got what's going on in California today, Colorado, And brother, if you've never been in a disaster or tried to reconstitute something, it is impossibly hard. Because where do you start? Where do you start? Well, all right, when we have snow in the area, and it gets above, well, for this area, what, 3 inches? Right? We got a Castor trophy, right? But when you get a foot of snow, right? You guys from Loudoun County, right?
Yeah.
Off your county, you got a foot of snow out there. When's that plow coming?
Next week?
Next week, right? But everybody's yelling, get the plow to my street. Right? Come on. Where do you start? You start with hospitals, you start with police stations, you start with your major thoroughfares, right? And whenever you get to that guy who lives on 3 acres out there in Faulkner County, the snow will be melted, but we'll get to you. Right? When you have large disasters like are going on in this country now, you've got how many thousands of homes burned in California? Even if you had all the wood, all the masonry, all the electric, all the wire, who's going to build it? There's not enough people in this country to do all of that. And it's frustrating, and it's horrible, and it takes time. It's frustrating, it's horrible, it takes time. Rob, get me in the building. I need to come back in the building. We need to put the building back together. We made it in a year. It was a long year. It was a tough year. It was a gratifying year. We lost too many people. But we came back as a country. Okay? And now this building is back together again. And due to COVID, there's about 25% of people working here now. And it is. It's amazing. It's amazing. You want to get a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you have to wait in line. Right? So that's my story on 9/11. That's the story of the building. That's some of the stories about some of the people. I will defer. Ma'am, if you have anything to say, either of you have anything to say, please.
I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who showed up today. I appreciate everybody coming out.
Thank everybody for coming out today. You were closer than I was to people here and closer to the rebuild effort. So please.
I can't speak very loud. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Lori Lachek, and I lost my husband, Dave Lachek, obviously on 9/11. And I feel like this country is forgetting the tragedy that we all as a nation suffered. So seeing you all here today just warms my heart and gives me hope for our future, that you are not forgetting what happened. We have to stay vigilant. We can't become complacent. And I just thank you all from the bottom of my heart. This is obviously a tragedy for our nation, but it was a personal tragedy for me. My daughter was 7 years old, and my son was 9 years old. People think that a lot of time has passed, everybody's over it. We are never over it. This still haunts us. We have a huge hole in our hearts that will always be there. My son wears a bracelet with his dad's name on it every single day. His license plate is one of the fight terrorism license plates with Dave's initials on it and his college football jersey number 4. This will always be a part of us, and we will always have the pain. My daughter just got engaged. She's about to get married, and her dad is not here to walk her down the aisle. Her dad's not here to have that father-daughter dance. Those are things that people think about as being something that's very difficult when you've lost somebody so dear and such a part of your life. But still, it's all the little moments too. It's every single day, every single breath we live without him. And I, as Rob was talking about, I am only one of 184 stories here at the Pentagon, and of course nearly 3,000 for our nation. So again, I just tell you a face, a name, a person to attach to one of those numbers. But I, again, can't thank you enough for being here and remembering what happened on that horrible day.